Hello, hello, everybody. Welcome in, guys. Welcome to the stream. Hey, Puppy Paws, what's going on, man? Hey, I got the chat changed over today to make sure that we should be able to see all of your chats, man. And I'm getting a little bit of an error. Let's clear these. There we go, guys. Today I want to talk about the real cost of freedom. It's in the title, and another one of these serious streams. I'm just getting a spinning disc over here, so let me make sure that our stream is going through. Let me see. Are we good? Maybe we're good. Somebody let me know in chat. Maybe we're good now. All right. We might have to restart OBS. Hey, what's up, Buddha? It's been a while, man. Yeah, it's good to see you. So, you know, you might think you know where this is going. I'm gonna guess probably you don't on this one, guys. Just to let you know. So, what is the real cost of freedom? There's a cadence that I remember from being in the military, and I think people have covered it. Freedom for those of you who don't know, cadence is like when you're marching, or sometimes when you're running or whatever, double time, whatever it happens to be, you'll sing cadence so that everybody's in step. Okay, it's just a way of keeping everybody in step. The basic one is right. Just when a drill sergeant or somebody is calling out for a formation, you're left, right? They'll just say left, 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 right. Something like that, right? Let you know that's when your foot should be hitting the ground and what have you. Well, there's like a long tradition of a lot of people write cadence when you're in training for these various things because I don't know, creative and you want to do that. And one of them that has stuck with me, I have no idea where the origin on any of this stuff it comes from. Yeah, hard work. Yeah, exactly. Buddha knows. So there's quite a few of these, and people will make them. Like I know guys that I was in training with that wrote their own cadence and would get a chance to like lead the formation and would call it and what have you, and including while running and other stuff. And it's one of the cooler parts of honestly of getting to having to be in formation and do all that stuff. And there's one that goes some say freedom is free, but I tend to disagree. And then there'll be various lines. I say freedom is one down the barrel of a gun, and usually there's some progression there. Hey, Nani. Where it'll I say freedom is won with the blood of someone's son, and then the various parts, and I there's the standard ones like where you'll go through and they'll say my father fought in World War I, he was killed, and the location, right, or fought in Vietnam and was killed at location or whatever. And I've been in formations. Hey Amanda, what's going on? I have been in formations where the drill sergeant who was singing that father, brother, whoever had died at a particular location, and they inserted that. And you haven't experienced hearing that cadence called until you've been in that situation. Not really. And the idea though is that there's a price to be paid, a price for freedom. And as someone who joined the military, I was very patriotic, very young. I grew up in Texas, and that's just Texas. Like recruitment is way higher than all most of the other states, if not all of them. Also because it's populous as well. But this idea of just patriotism in general. And I was never super comfortable, and I still am not, with people saying thank you for your service. You guys have heard about a bunch because I think it's relevant to what we're talking about. But normally in my daily life, I don't lead. People don't know I was in the military. It was a long time ago. I never got shot at. I've told you guys this before, et cetera, et cetera. My contribution to my paying back society for some of the freedoms that I enjoy, consisted of doing my job, serving my country. Sure, you give up a lot of stuff. You give up your freedom. You don't have. I wasn't allowed to leave within so many miles of the base without like special permission, and that's standard stuff. If you're not in the U.S. In the U.S., I still think there's probably something, but they can call you up at any time. Hours don't matter. There's a lot of stuff. You give up a lot of freedoms, and they try to make it as bearable as possible for the most part. Sometimes not. But you give up a lot. Some places, what they pay you in the military is considered, at least when I was in, it was considered to be like you could collect welfare. That's how low you were paid. Now they provided housing. It's not great housing, and there's been issues with that where housing is like there's problems with lead paint, lead pipes, other stuff that is unhealthy for your family if you're living there. So there have been issues with that before. I remember being in the barracks, just like a random story. I remember being in the barracks and it wasn't where I was at because I was like where all the single soldiers were at, and so we had a different barracks. But some of the other guys that were married, they had they'd have a little bit better situation. I had a room and then I shared a bathroom, and it was literally just one room. That's where I lived. But there would be other people that were married, and and there would be an Army guy and an Air Force guy because it was used for a headquarters. Uh, uh, sorry, using slang. It was headquarters with a bunch of different military branches there. Okay, U.S. Army Europe is what USER is, and and the Air Force guy would get a separate stipend because it was below standard housing. It was below their like minimum standards for housing. So they would get like an extra stipend for like the hardship of having to stay there. And then the army guys didn't. So this was like, one of the many jokes that are had and often in good fun, but between the various branches of the military, Air Force people get more money for less people and they get treated a lot better. um, but my point in all that is you have to give up something, and your family gives up something, and it's significant. Now, if you actually get deployed, now many people, I forget his name, but the guy who played Kylo Ren um, was a Marine, and he's talked about this before. But when I went in, I joined, and my job title was a combat medic, so I wanted to get deployed. That's what I signed up for, and so but I couldn't get deployed. I got stationed at a hospital and it just didn't happen. It wasn't in the cards for me. So a lot of us want to get deployed. A lot of us signed up for a particular reason, and as varied as the people that join, right? But you're still giving up something, is my point. And you have people that are willing to die. You have people that are willing to kill to protect freedom, right? And I always felt like my contribution was I don't know, a reasonable minimum is still how I feel about it. And it's probably more than that from an objective point of view. But I think the idea of like giving back and, essentially supporting and giving back to your country is something that was core to me. And interesting, I was stationed in Germany, as I mentioned before, and in Germany there's mandatory service, and you don't have to go into the military. And in fact, at the time, well, this is probably changing right now. It is changing right now, I'm sure. At the time, that they didn't keep much of a standing military, and so they didn't need that many people. But also, they would like you could do other things. There were various social services or what have you, think Peace Corps type stuff, but you had to do something at some point to so some sort of civil service was required, right? And I honestly really like that idea, but we don't really do that here. You know, we could argue the merits of it, but the idea is that there is some cost, right? And the cost for service members, it could be something extreme. It could be the cost of someone's life, their health, limb. Um, I went to a concert near me where Red Rocks here, and in the front row they had a guy who was paraplegic, and he was a veteran, and it was cool. It was Five Finger Death Punch, I think, and they recognized the guy and talked to him and went down, and I think they gave him some swag and what have you. His sister that was there taking care of them, Latino, by the way, and he couldn't talk. He was not able to. His blinking was the most he could communicate. And I see someone like that, I think of what they paid compared to what I paid, and it doesn't feel like these one is not like the other, right? And so these are, pretty extreme things. But fast forward a couple of decades since I joined when I was very young. And I think about this, and I become to think that the real price of freedom is different, and I think it is more than what most of us consider it. And I think it's not something we often think about, like, oh yeah, these people, they went out and did this thing, they're serving their community. And then you might look at, oftentimes it's police and firefighters. We might have to talk about flags at the end of this, but police and firefighters, and ideally, yeah, that's what they're doing, right? They're serving their community. Some people, it's just a job. But you also have like doctors and nurses that are serving their communities. I think that is huge. I think that's massive. But there are others as well. There are people that work for the Social Security Administration, right? And they're working there and they're serving us, right? And there are people that work for DoD, very serious people who are very concerned about the overall safety of the U.S. and similar to the military, right? And then there are also people that work in the diplomatic corps that are doing the exact same thing. They're very concerned about U.S. security and serving their country. They're just serving it in a different way. And there are also people that work for the Department of Energy and, very all the departments in the government, and they are working to serve us, right? To serve their community. Nani says, you and I are in the same place with that. I feel like my contribution was so minimum compared to others, even some of my own group that paid during Desert Storm. Yeah. And, the thing is that I think the truth is that we all have to pay something. And I don't think I have. I know I haven't, actually. And I imagine most people haven't been paying the real price. Now, the price might be something extreme. It might be military service. It might be dying to needless police brutality, right? It could be any number of things. It could be fighting for civil rights, right? It could be, Martin Luther King, right? We just had celebrated his life, and it could be that, right? But I think where I'm going with this, first off, I don't want. So here's the problem: is like so many of us are just struggling to get by. We're struggling with money. We're struggling with being able to take care of our family. We're struggling with just trying to live our lives. And I'm in that boat. I get it. It's incredibly difficult. There's a lot just to be able to get through life. What I honestly think is going on, at the risk of sounding like a conspiracy theorist, I don't necessarily think it's like a conspiracy. I just think it might be a happy little accident for those doing it. Sorry, Bob Ross. Don't mean to profane your favorite saying, but when you're worried about food, clothing, and shelter, right? When you're worried about the basic necessities of life, and it goes a little bit more than that, right? Because it is your job. It is having a phone, a place to sleep, a car, right? Because you need those things to make sure you have food, clothing, and shelter. If you don't have a phone, if you don't have a car, you're going to be in trouble, right? It's going to be very difficult for you to do those other things. And there are so many businesses that are designed to prey on poor people, that are designed to keep you that way. There's also large, massive companies that are, again, designed to keep people that way, right? You get slave labor, treatment at so many different companies. Amazon, right? Warehouses are notorious for this. People having to pee in cups, and there's so many things like this going on in the U.S. And I don't want I don't want you guys, I don't want anybody to feel like I'm adding another burden to the list, okay? But I do want to talk about this because I think it's important. And I think what I am coming to realize as I don't know, now as I'm older, I don't know. But what I'm coming to realize is that the actual cost of freedom is way more than that. it's not about going and fighting some war somewhere else, right? It's been a long time since we've had to actually fight a war for our own freedom. After 9/11, you might say, you know, we were there were like 5 terrorists from Saudi Arabia that did the whole World Trade thing, and so we invaded Iraq. Uh, some head scratchers on some of that stuff, but it's been a long time since we felt like we needed to go someplace and really fight, right? Like there are things that in the geopolitics and whatever that we do need to be involved in. I think we could argue that, but I think the real or part of the real cost, and I think it's incredibly real, and I think it's incredibly neglected, is I think it's some of the, I don't know, we'll call them softer things that are required, some of the softer costs, and some of those are, first off, voting. So many people just don't even vote, and I get it. That was me, right? And it was kind of like, yeah, I don't have time to deal with this. I've got enough stuff going on, and what have you. The other part of that is if you're going to vote, I think there's a responsibility to be an informed voter, to actually know what is going on, to know who you're voting for, to know what they stand for. And a big part of that, and this can go absolutely like be bipartisan, is to know like both sides. And I think that, not just listen. I mean, some people literally get their news from like memes. We've seen that on I've seen various comedic shows where they like cover stuff where people literally are getting their information from memes. I know with my own family, and I won't get into too much in particulars, but I know like I have one family member that has long considered another family member to be a low information voter. And like they don't know what's going on, they're not paying attention, what have you. And I think some of that was like fairly valid criticism at times. At the same time, the person that was criticizing gets like wild misinformation, like sends me crazy conspiracy theories at the same time. And so it's like, both of these things can be true. You can't have a low information and then someone who's like literally like we know aliens exist and we have bases on the moon kind of stuff. Like the world is flat kind of shit. Like just crazy stuff, right? So it can be both ways, and it can be both sides. But I think that to try to make sure that, first off, you got to vote. You gotta know, try to be informed. And then, there are some things that are complex, and it is frustrating and it's hard, and it's something that, civics should be taught in school, and it's not anymore. I think since like the 60s, we've been going downhill on that. But there are some things. One of the things is if, somebody's making it harder for you to vote, that's usually a pretty good sign that that person is the bad guy, okay? And again, we can argue like different, oh, well, this, you have most politicians are not great, right? They self-deal, they do a lot of different things. And it might be something where like, hey, maybe you're the person that needs to be running, Maybe we need more like, people with morals and what have you in politics. But in the meantime, if we can just like, can we just figure out the people that are like truly evil, that are like trying to take away our rights, that want you not to be able to vote, want to make it harder for people to vote, are lying about things that are just like blatant, right? Like let's deal with that, and just to be informed. The other thing is, the protests in Minneapolis, and the people that have died. That's some of the cost. If you have a right, I mean, if you want to talk about, and I'm trying to appeal, right? I hope you guys will get this. I'm trying to appeal to certain sides, because I want everybody to. I'm trying to appeal to everybody. But if you say you have a right, but you can't exercise it without something horrible happening to you, and it doesn't have to be death, but something horrible happened to you. I'm here to tell you, you don't have that right? You think you do, but you don't. You can find them here on YouTube, and some of them, and it's unfortunate. Some of them are crazy, but you can look up like auditors, like first, second, whatever amendment auditors here on YouTube, and some of them are crazy and they're just trying to cause problems or whatever. And you can find people that will go out and they will record in places, and sometimes the cop comes up and they're like, "Hey, what are you doing?" "I'm recording." "Okay, cool. That's it. You can record out in public. You're allowed to do it anywhere anything you can see from a public place, you're allowed to record. Sometimes the cop comes out and they harass them. Sometimes they get beat up. Sometimes they get taken to jail and what have you. And you can see, like, and the same thing with various court buildings. If it's a public area, you're allowed to film there. Those are our buildings. They're public. That's the idea. Some of these guys get crazy or what have you, but then there are people that want to protest, and we have a right to do that. Now there are various laws about that, and some of it gets into a little bit of a gray area. But there has long been need, if you look no further than the civil rights movement, to look to see police brutality and people. Maybe it's technically unlawful, but clearly the laws are designed for race. In the case of the civil rights, literally designed because of racism. To keep people in their place, right? To keep people from actually having the same rights that I have as a white person in the U.S. And so, sure, there's some gray area there or whatever. I think we can all agree that standing up for someone who's getting beat up by the police and pepper sprayed for no reason. Shouldn't be, even if you're obstructing justice, shouldn't be a death sentence, right? Like that's not those two things don't go together, okay? And if you have a gun that you're legally allowed to carry in the U.S., that shouldn't also be a death sentence in that situation. I think any reasonable person, and I don't mean if you don't feel that way, I'm sorry, I don't mean to call you names or whatever, but I think any reasonable person would say that, yeah, that shouldn't happen. People seem to be equating or saying that, oh, well, if you don't do what a police officer says, like you should be shot, or it's okay that you were shot. That's crazy talk, right? Isn't it? It should be. It should be. This isn't the case in other places. Speaking of Germany, when I was stationed in Germany, they do an in-processing, and part of that is like you need to know about the culture, but you also need to know about the laws. And so they'll have someone there you'll have classes you have to go to. And I remember very vividly, and also being told at my unit outside of that too, how to react to the Polizei, the German police. And one of the like half joking things that would say is like they would tell you they can pull you over, they don't have to have a reason, and they can draw your blood to see if you're intoxicated. That is allowed, that at least at the time that I lived there, that was allowed. They could do that, and they would inform you, because in the U.S. you can't do that, right? In the U.S., we're much more about personal freedoms. You're not allowed to do that. In Germany, the way it was explained to me, and German friends out there, correct me if I'm off on any of this, please. But the way it was explained to me, and my understanding of it, that it was about the social good. And so if you're, it's more about society as a whole. So your personal rights take a back seat to the social good. And so they would let you know, like, if they pull you over, yes, they can pull you out of the car. Yes, they can draw blood. There's also other things they tell you, like, yeah, you have to, some places you have to just pay the officer a fine. If they fine you, you pay them right there. And that also seemed like if you're like, depending on where you're from, this is like, is this extortion? What's going on here? And they would jokingly tell us that like if you don't, like, they'll either take it from a needle or they'll pick it up off the sidewalk. In other words, they were going to restrain you and do whatever they needed to draw your blood, and they could do that. They were allowed to do that. And I saw some interesting things while I was there. Like, I once saw there's a bar fight, and the Polizei came in and they like zip tied like a whole bunch of people and then arrested like one or two guys. But it was just about keeping the situation safe, making sure it was okay. And then they only arrested the parties that were serious. I would also say that I've never really had any direct situations like it's not like in the U.S. where they're, at least in my experience, which I lived there for a couple of years, where you didn't just run into police everywhere. So it was more of like they weren't as concerned with like petty crimes as much. At least that's certainly what it felt like to me. But it was also told like, hey, if the Polizei tell you to do something, you do it, because that's the way it is. In the U.S., it's not like that. Okay, we have we have rights. We have Second Amendment rights, Fourth Amendment rights, and it's crazy to me because some people in the U.S. right now seem to have a lot of the people that like people that are from places where I'm from in Texas, right, where you've got guns. Listen, guys, I grew up with people who had guns. I've been shot at. Okay. Out in the country, like people I know have been shot at. People had guns. That was just a thing. And there's so much of this like, come take it over my cold dead body kind of attitude. And and that's just the way things were. People have guns. They're like going to school. People would drive to school. And this stopped while like I was in school, okay? But people would drive to school and they would have gun racks in the back of their trucks, okay? Parking in the school parking lot, right? My siblings, older than me, went to school with people, and my friends, their older siblings, went to school and they had gun racks in the back of their trucks with guns on them, okay? with guns on them. And that's just the way it was. And it seems like, you know, and this idea about like unlawful searches and seizures, right? This is an amendment to the Constitution that we are supposed to be protected against unlawful searches and seizures. And when you look at what is going on with the government right now, it's pretty egregious and pretty clear that this is not what is happening. Okay. And if you're really interested in this stuff, guys, just as an FYI, I highly recommend, and I'll actually pull it up. I highly recommend checking out the YouTube channel Institute for Justice here on YouTube. They do a lot of this stuff, and I would say that they're very nonpartisan. It really is just about like, hey, here's the law, here's the rules. You know, why is the government not following this stuff? So I'll just link it here. I highly recommend it. Go check them out. And let me take a moment to catch up on some of these comments. First of all, hello everybody. I appreciate you guys dropping in. Chicken, Commander Vaughn, Amanda. I already said hi to you, man. I'm sorry, but I'll say hi again. Let me see here. Vaughn says, Frog. Frog says, it's sad that we even have to say such obvious truths, to be honest. Yeah, exactly. Vaughn says, yeah, I totally agree. People are saying him being shot was okay, which is really dumb to say because if there's no reason to shoot him, that's unauthorized use of force. I'm trying to be a lawyer in the near future, and yet I know that, which is crazy. Yeah. Well, that's awesome to hear, man. Frog says, must be surreal to work in law enforcement right now. Yeah. Hey, what up, Luke? Good to see you, man. Frog says, from Texas, can confirm been shot at. Yeah. Yeah, because they went hunting after school. Yeah, I mean, honestly, you know, there were some different folks, man. I went to school with some different folks. I'll save some of those stories for another time, maybe. Yeah. Some things that I still have problems like putting together, two and two together. But, you know, we have constitutional rights. They matter. They've been being eroded for a long time. And honestly, depending on, you know, where you're from, what you look like, you might never have had them, right? You know, if you're poor, if you're from the South, if you're not white, depending on where you're from or where you're at, like these are huge factors into, you know, how you can be treated. Anybody who has known me for my entire life, I have talked about, you know, issues with policing. And I think it's pretty egregious, and I'll continue to talk about it. But these things right now that are happening are really, they seem like a big deal. And they are. The thing that I really want to instill, if I can, in this moment, is that there are more problems with our democracy, okay? There are huge problems. One of the massive ones, Edward Snowden was a whistleblower who talked about the U.S. and exposed how the U.S. was spying on its own citizens, right? Which they are not supposed to do. And for that, he's now living, you know, in Russia. What was being done was illegal and it was not okay. And that was the price that he paid. Okay, if he was here, he would be in jail probably for the rest of his life. He did the smart move and left the country, but that is the price he was willing to pay. And if you don't know anything about Edward Snowden, it's been a while now. Go check it out. But you know, that's a price that someone had to pay for freedom, was being a whistleblower. And while we have whistleblower laws, continually whistleblowers are retaliated against and punished. And when it comes to national defense, because we have various national defense laws that allow them to, generally speaking, it does not go well for any whistleblower in the national defense space. It just doesn't. Even when they try to do everything as best they can, it just does not go well for them. And so that's a major problem. That's a huge problem. And there are people in the various government organizations, even right now, who are, I mean, if you want to look at like some of the oil and natural gas and coal and stuff like that, we all realize that we only have one planet, okay? And we can't keep treating it the way we're treating it. We need to do something different. And generally speaking, I think most of the world is on board with this. But there are still people that would like to make money at the expense of everybody else's health and well being with natural disasters, poor air quality, and what have you. And, you know, there are people that work at government, the EPA, at the government organizations who were working to, a lot of these people are scientists, guys, and they have doctorate degrees and stuff that is, you know, pretty serious, pretty difficult to get. This isn't a doctorate degree in sports science, okay, which would be very easy to get compared to most of these things. And they take pay cuts to work for the government. They're not working, you know, all this idea that scientists are like getting grants and making a ton of money. None of that is true. They could make more money if they wanted to go work for Exxon, like way more money, like hundreds of thousands of more dollars. Okay. But they choose to do it because they care about us. They care about the world. They care about everyone else. And I just want to point out that these are more ways that people are giving up. This is the cost. This is the cost for them. And we see people being whistleblowers. We see people pointing out, you know, when justice is not being served, people resigning and what have you. There are people whose entire lives are being ruined right now because they're trying to speak out about, you know, the crazy things that, I mean, we know now, right? Like Doge like failed, right? It did not work. And part of that was because it was kind of sold, it was sold on a lie, right? We're all about, it's bipartisan. Government fraud, waste, and abuse, we want to cut down on it. We want the government to be efficient. We don't want people to be self-dealing, et cetera, et cetera. But there's a right and a wrong way to do it. And clearly what Doge, well, people might disagree, but if you look into it, guys, I mean, even Elon has said that like Doge was a failure, right? Like he's admitted that now. But there are people that will work and do these jobs, and you know, it's weird because if you grew up, I get it. If you grew up like I did, and many other people, right? But if you grew up like I did, and you have someone who has like a government job, government jobs are like good jobs. Man, they give you like benefits, you get like health insurance, and it's crazy because a lot of the stuff you get being it's like a good job is like normal in most other like developed countries. Like having health insurance. So if you get cancer or something bad doesn't happen, you know, like you don't have to worry about should I take my kid to the doctor or not, you know, or wait till they're basically dying. That was the rule, you know, growing up. I remember my you know father telling my brothers and I not to fight because he wasn't going to take one of us to the fucking hospital if someone got hurt, right? Like he didn't care if we're fighting. He wasn't going to pay the doctor. He was threatening. He probably would have, but like my mom would have made him, I guess. But he didn't want to take us, you know, that kind of stuff like not being the case, right? And it's true. That's not so. But for us in America, because we're so used to such a low quality of life. For the, you know, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know where the demographics land, if it's poor people or if it's actually most of society or whatever. But for a lot of us, you know, the basic necessities of life are not guaranteed, and you're struggling just to survive. And so government jobs, people look at them and like, oh, they're cushy jobs. And you know what? I am sure there are people that are, you know, just like there are. I mean, this happened when I was in the military. There were dirtbags when I was in the military, right? But you know, the night hard back in my day mentality. That's funny. And people look at those jobs and like, oh yeah, they're lazy or whatever. The people that I know that work in for the government work incredibly hard and care a lot about their jobs, and they work really hard because they realize that, even if they're just working at the Social Security office, they realize that it's very important that they get these people their checks so that they can afford their medication, so that they can take care of their family and what have you. And the fact that and instead it creates this like opposition. What really should happen, it's not that the government employees are the problem, it's that what everybody else is getting paid is the problem. And the thing is, it's by design. It's by design to extract money out of the poorest people and give it to the people on top. And that's what's going on. And we need to like understand that, we need to realize it, and we need to not blame the other people that are struggling to get by or have just made it or what have you, and instead realize it is the bigger problems. I mentioned this the other day. I did kind of a short or whatever, but the other part it takes a bit of courage. It takes a little bit of saying, you know what, I'm going to do something. I'm going to make a difference. And I think what we've seen pretty clearly in recent history is that there are people with a lot of power and a lot of privilege. And I'm talking about the Mark Zuckerbergs, the Jeff Bezoses, the Elon Musks, the Tim Cooks of the world, who these are CEOs of various tech companies and what have you, guys, if you don't know who some of these people are. And what we've seen is that they're cowards. They're not willing to stand up to anybody. And you know what? It makes sense for them because they're worried about their own comfort. They're worried about their own position. And here's the thing, though. There are more of us than there are of them. And here's also the thing is that it might take more Renee Goods. It might take more, it's Alex, I'm sorry, his last name, Pruitt, I think, or something like that. It's not Pruitt, it's something like that. It might take more of them. I don't know. I hope not. But one thing I absolutely know without a doubt is that it is going to take more civil servants. It is going to take more average, everyday people standing up, exercising their rights to get things to change. Thanks, Preddy. Thank you, Amanda. Vossball says, bro, what exactly are you advocating for? What I am advocating, that's a great question. I should read up some of these comments and then we'll get there. Nani says Ground News is a great source too. If you want to see how things are being reported by various points of view, read what the other side is seeing. Yes, read what the other side is seeing, if nothing else, to educate yourself. But everybody should be informed, I think, to a large degree on what's going on. Frog says, I can attest that telling the truth in the oil and gas is going to be a bad time. Yeah. Yep. A ton of U.S. left the Corps of Engineers last year. Really great people, no longer serving the country. Yeah. Hey, Silver, what's going on? Silverwood says, being in Canada, I really can't believe what the U.S. is going through right now. Yeah. Frog says, sorry, Canada. Y'all are cool and don't deserve this abuse. Absolutely. Yeah. Or Greenland. It's insane. Amanda says, I work for a major hospital and I still tell my kids we're not making any hospital trips this weekend. So don't do something that they can't tolerate until Monday. Yeah. And some of that maybe you just say to your kids too. Like I'm sure my parents, to get them to not, be careful. You just want them to be careful. But it just shouldn't be the case, right? It just shouldn't. And it's not in other countries. Voss says, I don't think it's necessarily a low quality of life, more like poor prioritization of funds. People like to joke about 98% of the U.S. spending going towards military, but that's also the reason the dollar is worth anything. So Vossboss, I'm just trying to follow you here. Poor prioritization of funds by the government or by individuals or by both? Which do you mean there? Yeah, so that's one of the things too. If you want to talk about government spending, we won't get into it right this moment. We can in a second if you would like. But if we want to talk about government spending, we can get there. I am not someone. Some people think that we could not have a military and hold hands and sing Kumbaya. I know that's not the case. That's not okay. I mean, look no further than Ukraine, right? There are people that will take things because they have the power to do it. Look no further than the U.S. right now in Venezuela and with Greenland. You have someone who wants to take things because they think that they can, and so they think it's okay to just do it, and it's not. So yeah, you do need a military, unfortunately. But you could, I think most people, even military folks, would say maybe we've gone a little bit overboard. Because it does seem like a lot of the military spending seems designed to make profits for companies. If you want to talk about fraud, waste, and abuse, I think DoD and military spending would be a great place to start. They've never passed, to my knowledge, I don't think they've ever passed an audit before, which is to figure out where the money is going. Okay, what exactly is my point? What am I advocating for? What I am advocating for, what I'm trying to say, the whole point of all of this is that freedom isn't free, and the cost is not just somebody going somewhere and serving in the military. It sure as hell isn't putting a fucking flag out in front of your yard. But it's going to cost something. It does cost something, and if we don't pay the cost, we will lose it. Okay, and the thing is that in a lot of ways, our Declaration of Independence and our Constitution were aspirational. Okay, the pursuit, of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that was still isn't guaranteed to many people. Okay, and if you think, oh no, it generally was, well, it generally was maybe if you're white, right? But in people still living's lifetime, the U.S. has been incredibly racist and has had laws that were incredibly racist. And there are still, I know people that are younger than me that know about a sundown town. If you don't know what a sundown town is, Google it. But it basically means if you're black, don't be in that town after dark, okay? And there are still places that are like that in the U.S. Now, you might, some I'm sure might try to diminish and say that's just some places, but we can see with ICE and Border Patrol right now that if you're just not white, you have less rights than everybody else. That stuff is currently going on. And my point is that I am not trying to put a burden on anybody, but what I am trying to encourage everybody to do is just to realize that there is a cost, and it's being educated about civics. It's being educated about what's going on in the news. It's about voting. It is about understanding what the various, there's certain political groups that try to act like the government can never do anything good. And they're like, oh, small government, the government always does terrible things. Do you know what the government does? Do you know what the organization that they're advocating abolishing, do you know what that organization does? Because Doge and Elon Musk didn't, and they fucked around with it, and they found out that it was not a good idea, right? Cutting funding to, to cancer research. Another one that has come up, right, with the American aid, right, U.S. aid, right, is what the organization I believe is called. U.S. aid. The reason, and it's just trying to understand this, like why would we give things like, condom to places in Africa? Why would we give food assistance? Why would we give all this assistance to various places? Let's just pick Africa as an example, where a lot of U.S. aid. The reason we did that, guys, is because several reasons, depending on the exact place. Okay, one of the things we wanted to do, if we didn't do it, then we knew that our enemies would, particularly China in this particular case. And the reason they're trying to do that is because they want to be able to have friendly relationship with those countries. Okay. At the risk of grossly simplifying it, it's a game of risk. Okay. And we're all trying to move and have different allies and be able to put pieces on the board in different places. And that's part of the way how we do that. And we looked at it and we go, oh, all we got to do is give them food. Well, we have a lot of food. We can produce a lot of food. This is a relatively cheap thing. And then another big part of this, which is done when these things are being planned, is looking at the cost benefit analysis. Guys, this is not out of the goodness of our hearts. We look at it and we go, well, we can give them aid now and it's going to cost us X amount of dollars, or we can not do it And we can have a problem that's going to cost us 10 times that much in the future. And we know that because we've had this happen before. So let's pay the cheap cost now and gain the power, gain the influence. And sometimes it's for those reasons. Other times it is because, like, hey, if there's a crisis in another country, we know that we'll have an immigration problem here because those people will flee that country, and a lot of them are going to come here, and then we're going to have to spend more money on border and customs patrol, right? We're going to have to spend more money on that. So it would actually be cheaper for us to help stabilize or help make sure that that country is okay. And that's literally why we do it. So you can look at the various situations. You might agree or disagree with some or what have you, but just you need to understand this is part of the cost of freedom. It's to be informed and to understand what is actually going on. And if you see something, and if somebody is telling you that they're doing it for some insane reason, question that. Question why. Is that really, if it sounds crazy, maybe it is. Maybe we're, if you look at it and you're like, why, it seems crazy. Why the hell are we providing this, food assistance when we have people here who are starving? Well, we're doing it because we get more out of it than it costs us. That's why we're doing it. And the fact that we've, why do we have allies? Because we need them. It's better to have them than to not have them. And so understanding this stuff, like, why the hell would we invade Greenland? We've had bases there. We've decommissioned them. They're just sitting there. We could go back. We can get mineral rights there if it's about rare earth metals. That they'll give us. Why do we need it? Well, there's no reason. There's no reason. Why would we invade Venezuela? Oil? It's not even good oil. No oil company wants to go there until there's a stable government. Just ask questions, guys, and just realize that there are just try your best to be informed and try to be informed by multiple sides. I think that is one of the minimum costs, okay? And my point in all of this, to get back to Voss's excellent question, is like, what's my point in all of this? Is just to realize the cost of freedom isn't you or someone else going and serving in some foreign land and being really willing to die or risk everything for it. That is part of the cost. It is not the only cost. Every citizen it has to pay something. And I get it. If you're worried about food, clothing, and shelter, then how do you have time for most of this other stuff? I'm not trying to put more burdens. And I'm not saying everybody should go out and protest. I'm not saying everybody should strike. I'm not saying everybody should be an expert in civics, but something. We all have to pay the cost of freedom. We all have to pay. And the cost is much greater than we think. It's not just about sending soldiers somewhere. The cost is going to take our time. It's going to take some of our energy. And again, the alternative is much, much worse. And another thing about this is, as I often hear when we're talking about making social changes, and then I'll get back to these comments here. I often hear when we're talking about various social changes and everything, I've had people tell me, like, genuinely upset that, like, man, I wish we could provide healthcare for everybody, but we just can't afford it. And then they've even linked some study where they say, hey, here's how we can't afford it. Guys, one of the ways that can really help you with, like, the smell test, like, does this even pass the smell test, is if you look at other countries and see what they're doing. See what they're actually doing. Don't look at what some biased propaganda network is telling you. Go actually look and see what the people think, okay? And you'll find people with all different kinds of opinions. There is a lot of social safety in many other developed countries, really. But there are problems with that. There are issues. But the idea that if we're supposed to be the greatest country on earth, and we can't take care of our own people, like, how is that true? It's not true. It means that some of the people who already have a ridiculous amount of money and power would have a little bit less, and they don't want to give up any of it. There are people that the CEOs in the world, the United Healthcare, right, CEO, these guys, it's just never enough for them. And they will continue to take until you have nothing left if we let them. And again, that is what I'm telling you is doing something about some of this getting involved some way. There are so many more of us than there are of them. We have the power. We can vote, you know? And if you look, and a big part of what needs to happen is we need to change out some senators, some politicians is a huge part of that. But if you look at someone too who there are people that have given a lot for the country. There are people that have served the country for their entire life. Someone like Mark Kelly, and if you see someone taking John McCain, right, and if you see someone taking shots at those people, you really got to ask yourself, who's the bad guy here? And maybe some of them can be disagreements, but some of them clearly seem, you know, it's pretty crazy. We can go through these comments here. Let me see. Vosswell says, just asking for clarification because that phrasing seems a bit infrared, if you know what I mean. I don't know what you mean by infrared, but Luke says, folly befalls those who do not watch their allies as well as enemies. Frog says, natural results of democratizing your political system, but not your economic system. And then, yeah, I was talking about part of what I was talking about with the international stuff is what's called soft power, oftentimes. Vossball says, as the resident African of the chat, sending aid is nice in principle, but it's an empty gesture if that aid is poorly managed or embezzled by corrupt politicians in Africa. Yeah, well, you know, that's part of the deal too, Vossball, is like a lot of the people that were in charge in the U.S. of making sure that aid was going to where it should go to were the people that were fired. And so, yeah, that's like, it's a great point. Like, but we had people that are in charge of it, and it is a problem. Yeah, absolutely. But you don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, right? You don't go, oh, all this is dirty, let's just get rid of it. Because at that point, all the aid is a virtue signal. Yeah, I mean, again, you know, a lot of times we don't do it because it's actually virtuous. We do it because of power. Vospel says, wait, so we have to stabilize under other countries or they will come here. Why not just not allow them to come? Why does the U.S. specifically have obligations to do that? Voss, we're not talking. So it seems like you're talking about like, why do we have to do this moral thing? I'm not even going there. I'm not talking about morals. I'm talking about the reality of the situation that people will like, we know this will happen, right? We know people will flee. And so if we can, you know, it's again, we have to deal with the problem one way or the other. It's going to become our problem. We can't guard all of our borders. They're too large. Like we can patrol them. We can do various things, but like, it's the same with like the building a wall. Building a wall was never going to work. It's too monumental of a task, and it doesn't actually solve the problem because you can just put a ladder against a wall. You know, there are ways of getting around it. And so it's like, how do we actually solve the problem? It's not about morality in this. You can talk about the morality of it, right? But I'm just talking about there's a problem. And the problem is like, how do we solve this? Okay. If we're worried about China gaining a foothold closer to U.S. interests, and instead of a third party country that's either the US or China giving us access to their minerals, they give it to China, the US strategically is weakened. And so it's not about, none of this is about in this case, I'm not talking about the morality of it. I'm talking about you got to deal with it one way or the other. And it's like, well, how do we deal with it? The most cheap and best. And again, your arguments, like I get what you're saying too, because like, and on its surface, it does make sense. You're like, well, why do we have to deal with that? It's not fair, but life isn't fair. It's just the situation we're in, and we're just accepting the reality of the situation. And also, this is like about being informed, about understanding why we were doing those things in the first place. And then if you want to talk about the morality of it and what have you, that's maybe a separate thing. I would say, generally speaking, again, this is a big part of the problem. There is more than enough wealth in Elon Musk famously. I don't know if you guys remember that. He said, if anybody has a plan, or could come to me with a plan of how to like solve world hunger, and comes to me with a plan with like $1 billion or whatever it was, he would do it, right? And And what happened is that people came in with a plan. Uh, let me pull this up. I'll find something on it real quick. My point in all of this is like there is enough. If you don't think this or you don't understand it, it's probably, and I don't mean to be belittling it, but belittling or anything else, but it's probably because you don't understand how big the wealth divide is. But there are enough resources in the world. The wealthy do not need to live like gods while people starve. It just doesn't need to happen. It doesn't take that much to feed people. So there is some morality that I would say certainly comes into this. But the problem is that we don't even treat people in the U.S. as we should, because there are people that are. So if you show that you can take money and you can solve these problems, if you show that and everybody knows that, it becomes common knowledge, then what people will want is for you to take that money and solve these problems. And there are some people with a bunch of money that only want to get more and more money, and they have more than they can possibly ever spend, at least on anything rational. And I'm talking about while continue to live like gods. Okay, continue to take recreational trips out of the atmosphere. Okay, and they still have more money than they need, and they get that money not because they've done something, but because they've manipulated, because the system is designed to make them more money. Not because they're working hard, not because they're incredibly smart. The incredible smart people are the engineers. The incredible, like, hardworking people are the people actually doing the jobs. But now I'm getting off to something that I'm sure people will disagree with, because everybody thinks that if they just keep working hard, they'll strike it rich one day. Rev says, my mom wants me to make some social changes for real, like healthcare, food products, vets on the street, homelessness. Yeah. Nino says, you can't just tax the rich people and expect things to change. The amount of money is irrelevant. You got to change the laws that allow them to lobby. Absolutely. I think that's a great example. Nino, I really appreciate that. That's a great example of something that is very like bipartisan. I think we can all agree someone shouldn't be able to just buy elections, right? And the way they're able to buy it is because if you have enough money, you can run. I mean, you see smear ads, and they seem good. They do a good job of it, and that's part of too when we talk about the cost of freedom. Is there are people that are willing to sell their soul to make an ad to trick people into voting a way that they should, like against their own self-interest and against the interests of society, but in the interests of somebody with a lot of money who wants even more money. And exactly, we need to get that. We need to stop that, right? Like that's not what elections should be about. And getting money out of politics will be difficult, but it's absolutely something that should happen. Like without a doubt. Hopefully everybody could agree on that, right? People shouldn't be able to buy elections. That's essentially what they can do, or at least pay a bunch of money and heavily influence them. Luke says the end goal of prosperity is to spread it, not to hoard it. And since the U.S. Advertises amazing opportunities, why not go? Yeah. Frog says the amount of money is not irrelevant. Wealth inequality is innately destabilizing, but yeah, laws as well. Yeah, I didn't want to get into the semantics of whatever. I would agree that it's not completely irrelevant, but Nino says you're never going to fix inequality if they can just buy the laws. Yeah, I think we're arguing different sides of this, but we largely agree on the key points, which is I think what really matters. Vospa says, "Oh, I didn't mean corrupt politicians in America. That's the problem, but I meant I know what you meant, Vosboss. I had no there was no misunderstanding. We have people here in the U.S. That their job is, and many of them were fired, was to make sure that the aid was going where it actually should, and would do investigations and stuff like that. So." Yeah, I'm not sure where we got off, but I understood. I never didn't understand that. So, Commander Vaughn, a quick question. Yes, Greenland, Venezuela is violation of international law. Do you think the capture of Maduro was still right or good choice to make? Yeah, that's a great question, Vaughn. I don't have time to tell a longer story about invading Iraq the second time. But maybe if you remind me sometime, I can tell you the story, even if we're just hanging out in comms, about this. But the TLDR is, we have to decide, what are we doing? Are we going to do that with every evil dictator in the world? Are we doing it for the good reasons? And the answer is like, we weren't doing it for good reason. Trump did that, and he says like, oh, because he was like a bad guy, which he was. He was a horrible person. But he also has like, he pardoned another president that, for also being for doing the same thing. So clearly it wasn't based on any sort of moral grounds. And then, the question is like, what are we doing? What's the entire plan? It doesn't seem like we have one. So I would say no. I am someone who does not know enough about geopolitics, but like removing, something like Kim Jong-un from, North Korea, like that doesn't seem like the worst idea to me. And those guys are not nearly as developed as Venezuela. So, I don't know. I'm not opposed to the idea. I don't know that it's a good one, but I would defer to the experts. It definitely doesn't seem like it was a good idea based on the situation and everything that happened. Rev says, but it manipulates us into thinking it's getting solved. Yeah, sorry. Unfortunately, the thread is gone. Silver says, have to go get dinner, but great discussion. Hey, appreciate you hanging out, Silver. Boss says, I understand your point. I think the difference is different philosophical prioritization of ethics. Elon is rich, and what he does with his money is none of my concern because property rights. Yeah, the problem with that is it actually is more than that, though, right? Because we also have, he makes a lot of money off of government contracts. There's other things there as well. Yeah, and a lot of these guys make their money in shady ways, and then they use shady practices like buying politicians to continue their shady practices and make even more money. The Elon thing about him, like him having a chance to solve world hunger, was less about. It was a different point. Yeah, we're kind of talking about two different things and convoluting them. I don't know if we're talking about geopolitics or if we're talking about like my point with the Elon thing is like there was a dollar amount and there was a way to solve world hunger, and when he actually got it given to him, he didn't do it. Instead, he bought Twitter, right? So it's these guys are not going to make ethical choices, just left to their own devices. The thing is that a lot of these guys pay less in taxes than they pay less in taxes than the rest of us, while also getting, being able to live these lavish lifestyles, and they're not actually contributing to society as much as the average person, right? And society allows people to make money and to live those lifestyles, and there is a cost to that, and so that's what taxes are, right? So it's not about property rights. I mean, everybody has to deal with taxes, but we clearly see what happens if we don't. It used to be that we tax people at higher brackets who got incredibly high until we're taking like 90% of their income. And I think we should go back to something like that, because clearly what we're doing is not working. We can argue about exactly what we should do, but I think we can all agree that what we're doing right now is not working, and what we've done in the past worked better. So we could go back to that, or we could try something else, but I think we need to do something one way or the other. I think we differ in positive ethics versus negative ethics, i.e. if you have the ability to do something good and you don't do it, that makes you a good person or bad person. Oh, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised, boss. Amanda says, between smear ads and gerrymandering, elections are fairly imperfect, but better than nothing at times. Yeah. And I mean, I think that's the thing is that if everybody just got together and everybody actually voted and actually got involved, it wouldn't matter. And then we could fix things better, and other things that, like, again, are very bipartisan is like, if you look at what goes on in the US with our procedural stuff, a lot of it's like doesn't make sense, and it needs to be reformed. It needs to be changed and improved so that it works better for everybody. Right. And, yeah, like there's just some weird laws and some weird things and weird way of doing things. The whole budget reconciliation thing. There's a lot of stuff that just, I think we can all agree. It's when you see politics and it's broke and both sides playing games and doing what they can to like get a win for their side. And I think we all agree that it shouldn't be some game that everybody's trying to game, right? Like it's very serious stuff. But if one side does it, then the other side has to do it. There's constant finger pointing about which side did it first and who did it the worst and whatever. Gerrymandering, right? Gerrymandering happens with both sides. But if one side does it, then the other side, and it's like, yes, but we should just eliminate all of it and actually solve these problems in a better way. Rev says, honestly, haven't voted once, haven't trusted any politician enough. Yeah, man. I mean, I get that, dude. I get that, man. But I just want to encourage you that, like, and also if you're not informed, like, it's probably better to not to. But like, I think that's part of what I'm saying. Is like, I think this is the cost of of realizing that it is your duty. It is all of our duties, and we're gonna have to give up our time. We're gonna have to give up our and we're gonna have to educate ourselves. And honestly, again, like other things like this should be being taught in school, right? And I think that there's a lot of movements towards, yes, if you're wealthy and live in a nice place, education is going up, but there are other places that are being left behind, and making sure that it's fair and that everybody gets an education, because there are a lot of places where they really do just want to keep us dumb. And they know that dumb voters that are too poor and ignorant are going to they're easy to manipulate, and that's what they do, and there are people that do that. So Frog says nuance too hard to do in a stream chat, but appreciate the perspectives. Yeah. Vossbus says true. We should just do a free for all Discord call or something. Yeah, the chaos that followed would be glorious. Amanda says I highly recommend voting, even if your vote is to stop something else. Have absolutely cast votes for the other majority candidate to try to stop certain people from being elected. Yeah. Frog says Florida argument because he stole a lot of that money. Yeah. Well, and where did he get it? Right, like he got it. He got it from, like, was it like a ruby mine or something in South Africa? Anyways, there's another we could go into that, but I just don't think it's incredibly important. It's easier for a camel to fit through an eye of a needle than for a rich man to enter the kingdom of heaven. I'll finish that for you, Rev. Rev giving us some Bible verses here. Buying Twitter was the correct choice. Oh God. But can you find camels in Civ 7? Okay. Imagine if we still had 2020 censorship. Couldn't even having this conversation. Yeah, I don't know about. Yeah, Night Horror, you should play Frostpunk. It follows a lot of these items you're discussing at a base level. Dude, I looked at it, man. I just never quite got into it, man. I probably should. Volsmo says, I definitely don't think we should tax 90% of the richest income. They'll just leave and create economic deserts. It's one of those necessary evils. I'm going to strongly disagree with you. It's also marginal income, so it's on the higher percentages. But everybody says that they're going to leave. If all the developed countries are going to do it, where are they going to go? Where are they going to go? Go to a non-developed country and be a despot? Yeah, I mean they can do that. They can do that. They could go be a warlord in some developing country. Unfortunately, that would be bad. But I mean, let them go do it. They threaten. The thing is that people that are rich, it's like, oh, you need us. No, we need engineers. We need lawyers. We need doctors. We need these people. We don't need someone who just has a bunch of money. They're literally not contributing anything to society. And I've worked for some of these people. I know. Elon Musk is the dude's got issues. He's not a genius. Neither are any of these other guys. The thing that they're good at is getting more money. I mean, and the lack of spine in these guys, that's the other thing, is the lack of spine in all of them to, just cave at the weakest. Now we would be better off without them. Let them leave. It doesn't matter. They're not putting their money back into the economy. I'm still waiting for it to trickle the fuck down, and it hasn't happened yet. Sorry, getting up. We'd be better off without them. They don't actually do anything cheap. Yeah, exactly. Achievements they claim the credit and spoils for. Yeah, already pay a shitload of taxes, and they ain't doing nothing with all that money. Yeah, I mean, I think we might disagree with some of that. Most people definitely should not be voting. I think that is the thing. I think that we need to educate people. We need to get people more info, and should have an IQ test. I think we just need education. I don't think that. Yeah, I strongly disagree with you guys on that. I think everybody should be voting, because I think that I think people understand the basics of what is going on. They can understand the basics of what's going on in their life. I think getting money out of politics and actually having civil conversations and talking to people, like, listen, I get it. I mean, again, I've mentioned this. My my dad sends me crazy shit. Again, aliens, space, space bases, time travel, like, and other stuff. So I get it. uh, some people are, but I think as a whole, that's what we want, right? We want a democratic society where people can vote and it matters. Yeah. All right, guys. Well, I think we're going to probably keep getting comments in here, but I think that we're at our time. We're actually over time, and it's time to jump into some Helldivers. I'll finish these last couple of comments, and then I will stop. I will not read any more that are coming in. There should be as many reasonable limitations as possible. Yeah. Are we talking about on voting? Yeah, I would strongly disagree with that. We could talk about it more, but to understand, I don't know exactly what you guys mean, so maybe I'm just not understanding. But I would strongly disagree just on the face of it. Hot take: if you are a net tax recipient, you should not be allowed to influence the system. You cannot or should not be allowed to vote for more benefits. Yeah, Volsboss, this is a common lie that has been told to us, that there are people that will just vote for that will just continue to vote to receive more money from the government. And we say that a lot in the US. If you look at other countries, they don't have this problem. If you look at the UK, well, they'll provide people with housing. They'll provide people with the basic necessities. The thing is, and another thing, like, some people make bad decisions. I have a lot of people in my own family who have made a lot of bad decisions. Most of them are not around. That's how bad their decisions were over time. And so, I get it, but they have children too. Is it the children's fault? Like, what are we going to do? I think we should provide some basic level. If you ask people, and I've seen it, who grew up in the UK in particular, that just happens to be where I've heard a decent amount from, people that grow up on government assistance, no one is proud to be on government assistance. Nobody is like living La Vida Loca on government assistance, but it is enough that it does allow more people to pull themselves out of poverty. And that's what we want. And again, this is another one of those things, like, even if you don't care about the morality of it, if you look at this from how do we get what we want is a more prosperous nation. Well, a more prosperous nation, it comes along from having a people that are highly educated and trained. And so we don't want to abandon these children so that they become also a drain on society. And we want them to be educated so that they can improve their station. Will some number of people always be, impoverished and make bad decisions and what have you? Likely, yes. Yeah, I mean, there's almost always going to be somebody in a realistic world, yes. But how we deal with that matters. It's the same with looking at people that have drug addiction and stuff like that. You can look at other countries and see how they deal with those problems and actually address it, get people off drugs and to become more useful and more productive members of society. And you can see that they do a better job of it. The same with the prison system. And again, I'm removing morality from it. I'm just telling you the facts of, like, how you get from point A to point B. And you want a more prosperous country. You don't abandon those people. You don't not take care of them. I get that you're worried about, and I get it. It makes sense. You could have people that like, but the real problem is that, people need to get paid more. People are in poverty because they're not getting paid enough. And they're in poverty because of medical debt and various other things. If you look at this, a lot of people that are in poverty and not even living in a house too are working, and they're living in their car and what have you. And if we have basic social safety nets, also paying for people, like, college should be free so that anybody can go, so that it can be a meritocracy. In other countries, again, if you look at, most of Europe, you can go to school for free. You even get a stipend so you can live, so you can focus on your studies because it is your job. And I think those are great ideas. And for someone like me, a huge benefit. I mean, I got those benefits because I joined the military, and so I got the GI Bill, so I got to get paid while I went to school, and it was fucking amazing. The only problem is it ran out before I finished. But I mean, it's weird too that a lot of the things that people rail against, I get as a service member. Healthcare, education, I get those things. And it's like, okay, so you have to volunteer to potentially, I mean, I guess I'm okay with it at the time being, but I think it should be for everybody, And Yeah, and it's also wild too to hear like because Trump is a draft dodger, right? So it's kind of weird to hear from people that are like draft dodgers about some of this stuff too and how they feel about other people, you know. And it's like, oh, well, like this person wouldn't serve. They make fun of people that have served. Said about John McCain that I prefer someone who doesn't get captured, right? Like these are not good people that say things like this, and they're clearly. In my opinion, that you're telling me what side you're on, right? If the war hero you're saying is you know is not is stupid and the draft dodger is great, like I don't know what to tell you. Yeah. All right, but I think that is where I said I would stop. I know we got more comments. I will have to read them later. Maybe I'll find some stuff we can chat about it on the next stream. But yeah, Voss Boss, a lot of my takes on this stuff, and I'm choosing my arguments based on who I'm talking to a little bit, right? Because I do feel very strongly about this stuff on moral grounds, but even not on moral grounds, it's just we know this, we have data. I've studied economics to a small degree. I did applied math, and so various fields, how that might be applied is some of the stuff that I studied. But like we know, like people there's all kinds of wild stuff when you talk about this stuff, but like we know that people dying in a society is negative for the GDP, for the gross domestic product, and it's bad for society. We know there's a societal cost to people dying, so it's important to keep people alive and spend money on safety, whether that's like cycling lanes or any number of other things, because if people are going to die from accidents, then it will cost us money either way. And so there's like various arguments for a lot of this stuff that just like, yeah, we're doing it because this is the cheapest way to do it. And some people are like, oh, we shouldn't have to spend money. And it's like, well, maybe we shouldn't, but like, what are you going to do, right? What are you going to do if you don't take care of that kid? If you don't make sure they have a place to live because their parents, maybe let's just say the parents is a drug addict, a POS, whatever. That kid still needs a place to live. They still need education. And if we don't give them that, if we don't give them the opportunity to make a better life for themselves, they're just going to enter that. It's the same cycle and they're going to be in that same situation. And so we need to do something to break the cycle because, again, the societal costs will just compound. Similarly with prisons and what have you. But again, beyond the scope of today. Guys, I appreciate the conversation. I appreciate everybody for tuning in. It is really good. And I appreciate, again, very much people who disagree with me and that we can talk. I think this is another one of the costs. We have to be willing to talk to people that disagree with us and figure out where we agree, figure out how we can move forward, and also respect. You know, not everybody you can. I get it, but respect where you can that the other people are not evil. Some of them are, but most people are not. And it's they like Voss Boss, all your opinions and your take on this. Like you got a lot of great points, man. And I'm not saying I'm right about all this stuff, but being able to talk about it and have a decent conversation is, as I think, one of the things that we need. Um, you know, and it's so funny too. Like I've had people unsubscribe along, which is fine. Like out of all the costs in the world, losing subscribers, just people tell me they're like, I'm unsubscribing because I don't like what you said. It's like, dude, that is the least expensive thing I've ever had to pay. Like, I don't want it or whatever, but it doesn't even register as a loss to me because it's something I would pay 1,000 times over, to be able to encourage people to help make the world a better place. Losing subscribers doesn't really rate on the scale of things. All right, we're gonna get out of here. Voss Boss, no, feed your ego. No, man, I'm just Guppysaurus also has disagreed with me on stuff. A bunch of other people, man. So I just appreciate that we can have a conversation. Guys, we're gonna go deliver some democracy. We're gonna jump into some Helldivers. I'm gonna end the stream here. Actually, let me do this. Let me bio real quick, and then we'll come back and we'll jump over to some Helldivers. All right, I'll be right back. All right, guys, I'm back. Let me just get the game up, get it situated here. We are hell diving, and let me kick you over to the new stream. Let me end this one. You guys know the deal. I'll kick you over to the new one, and we'll go from there.